After weeks away, a father returns home hoping to surprise his daughters with a warm reunion. But in the midst of a storm, he finds the girls huddled together and soaked in the garden, abandoned by their own mother. What he does next shocks everyone in the mansion. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The rain hammered against the windshield of Michael Thompson's black BMW as he navigated the winding roads of Greenwich, Connecticut. Lightning illuminated the manicured lawns and grand estates that lined his route home, each flash revealing a landscape that spoke of old money and established success. After 3 grueling weeks in Tokyo, closing the biggest deal of his career, all Michael wanted was to hold his 8-year-old twin daughters Emma and Sophie and share the good news with his wife Victoria. The pharmaceutical company he'd built from nothing had just secured a partnership that would revolutionize treatment for rare childhood diseases. The irony wasn't lost on him that his success stemmed from his desire to help children like his own daughters, ensuring they'd never want for anything. As he turned into the familiar circular driveway of their colonial mansion, Michael smiled at the thought of surprising his family 2 days early. The house stood dark against the storm, which struck him as odd. Victoria usually kept the front lights on, and at 7 in the evening, there should have been warm yellow glows emanating from the kitchen and living room windows. Perhaps they were at dinner with friends, or maybe the power had gone out. Connecticut storms could be fierce in September. Michael parked under the covered portico and grabbed his briefcase and carry-on bag. The rain had intensified, creating a symphony of water against stone and metal. As he fumbled for his keys, a sound caught his attention above the storm's roar. It was faint at first, almost indistinguishable from the wind, but as he strained to listen, his blood ran cold. Crying. Children crying. The sound seemed to come from the side yard, near the ancient oak tree that had been Emma's favorite climbing spot since she could walk. Michael dropped his bags and ran toward the sound, his Italian leather shoes slipping on the wet flagstone path. What he saw when he rounded the corner would haunt him for the rest of his life. Huddled beneath the sprawling branches of the oak tree, soaked to the bone and shivering uncontrollably, were Emma and Sophie. Their matching pink pajamas clung to their small frames, and their blonde hair hung in wet tangles around their pale faces. They looked up at him with eyes that held a terror no child should ever experience. "Daddy!" Emma's voice broke as she stumbled toward him, Sophie close behind. They crashed into his arms with desperate force, their tiny bodies racked with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and primal. "My God, what are you doing out here?" Michael gathered them close, his heart racing as he felt how cold they were, how their lips had taken on a bluish tint. "Where's Mommy? Where's Mrs. Rodriguez?" Mrs. Rodriguez was their housekeeper and nanny, a woman who'd been with the family since the twins were toddlers. She lived in the guest house and would never leave the children unattended. "Mommy locked us out," Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. "She said we were bad, but we don't know what we did wrong." "She told us to wait here until you came home," Emma added, her small hands clutching at Michael's soaked shirt. "We've been waiting so long, Daddy. We're so cold and hungry." Michael's mind reeled as he tried to process what his daughters were telling him. Victoria had locked them outside, in a storm. The woman he'd married, the mother of his children, had done this. "How long have you been out here?" he asked gently, scooping Sophie into one arm while keeping Emma close with the other. "3 sleeps," Emma said matter-of-factly, the casual way she delivered this devastating information making it somehow worse. "We drank rainwater from the leaves and we found some berries by the fence. 3 days. His 8-year-old daughters had survived outside for 3 days, in various weather conditions, drinking rainwater and eating whatever they could forage." Michael felt a rage building inside him, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. But he forced himself to remain calm for their sake. "Let's get you inside and warm," he said, carrying Sophie while Emma clung to his free hand. "We'll get you into hot baths and make some soup, okay?" As they approached the front door, Michael noticed it was unlocked. That was another red flag. Victoria was obsessive about home security, always ensuring every door and window was properly secured. The house felt different the moment they stepped inside. It was too quiet, too still, as if the very life had been drained from it. The foyer chandelier cast eerie shadows on the marble floor, and Michael could see that something was fundamentally wrong. Picture frames sat askew on the side table, and Victoria's favorite crystal vase lay in pieces near the staircase, as if it had been knocked over in haste. "Mommy broke things," Sophie said quietly, noticing his gaze. She was very angry. She threw stuff around and said bad words. Michael set Sophie down but kept both girls close as they climbed the stairs toward their bedrooms. The twins' room was exactly as he'd left it 3 weeks ago, pristine and untouched, with their matching canopy beds made up in pink and white linens, their stuffed animals arranged perfectly on the window seat. It was as if this room existed in a protective bubble, separate from whatever chaos had consumed the rest of the house. But when Michael glanced toward the master bedroom at the end of the hall, his stomach dropped. The door stood wide open, revealing a space that looked like it had been ransacked. He could see drawers pulled out, their contents scattered, and the walk-in closet door hanging open to reveal empty hangers swaying slightly in the air conditioning. "You girls wait here," he said, settling them on Emma's bed. "I'm going to run your bath water, and then I need to make a phone call, okay? Don't leave this room." "Are you going away again?" Sophie asked, her voice small and frightened. "No, sweetheart. Daddy's not going anywhere. I'm staying right here with you." Michael's hands shook as he turned on the bath taps, testing the water temperature repeatedly to ensure it was perfect. His daughters needed warmth, food, and safety, but questions hammered at his brain with increasing urgency. Where was Victoria? Why had Mrs. Rodriguez allowed this to happen? What had driven his wife to abandon their children in such a cruel manner? As the bathtub filled, Michael pulled out his cell phone and dialed Mrs. Rodriguez's number. It went straight to voicemail, her familiar voice cheerfully asking callers to leave a message. He tried 3 more times with the same result. "Mrs. Rodriguez isn't answering," he told the girls as he helped them out of their soiled pajamas. The sight of their thin frames, marked with small scratches from their outdoor ordeal, made his chest tighten with protective fury. "Mommy sent her away," Emma said, as she sank into the warm water with a sigh of relief. "She said we didn't need her anymore, that we were big enough to take care of ourselves." "When did Mommy send her away?" Michael asked, trying to keep his voice steady as he shampooed Sophie's tangled hair. "The same day she locked us out," Sophie replied. "Mrs. Rodriguez cried when she left. She tried to take us with her, but Mommy wouldn't let her." Michael's heart broke a little more with each revelation. Maria Rodriguez had been like a grandmother to his daughters, and the thought of her being forced to abandon them against her will added another layer to this incomprehensible nightmare. After the girls were clean and dressed in fresh pajamas, Michael tucked them into Emma's bed together, knowing they'd need the comfort of each other's presence. He made them each a bowl of chicken soup from the pantry, watching as they ate with the desperate hunger of children who'd been surviving on berries and rainwater. "Daddy," Emma said between spoonfuls, "is Mommy coming back?" It was the question Michael had been dreading, partly because he didn't know the answer, and partly because he wasn't sure he wanted Victoria to come back after what she'd done. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said honestly, "but I want you both to know that no matter what happens, Daddy will always be here to take care of you. You're the most important things in my world, and I will never, ever let anything like this happen again." As the girls finished their soup and began to show signs of exhaustion, Michael's phone buzzed with a text message. The number was unfamiliar, but when he opened it, his blood turned to ice. It was a video file, and the preview image showed Victoria sitting in what appeared to be the cabin of a yacht, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the sunlight streaming through a porthole. With trembling fingers, Michael opened the video, turning the volume down so the girls couldn't hear. Victoria's face filled the screen, but she looked different somehow, harder, colder than the woman he'd married 8 years ago. "Hello, Michael," her recorded voice said with a smile that held no warmth. "If you're watching this, then you've found our dear daughters. I do hope they survived their little camping adventure." Michael's grip tightened on the phone as Victoria continued speaking, her tone casual, almost conversational, as if she were discussing the weather, rather than the abandonment of 2 innocent children. "I suppose you're wondering why I left them outside like unwanted pets. The truth is, darling, I never wanted children in the first place. Every moment of motherhood has been a performance for your benefit, and frankly, I'm tired of pretending." The video continued, and with each word, Michael felt his world crumbling around him. This wasn't the woman he'd fallen in love with. the woman who'd held his hand during every prenatal appointment, who'd cried tears of joy when the twins were born. This was a stranger wearing his wife's face, speaking with his wife's voice, destroying his family with surgical precision. As Victoria's confession played out on the small screen, Michael glanced at his daughters, now fast asleep in each other's arms, their faces finally peaceful after 3 days of terror. Whatever had happened to his marriage, whatever had driven Victoria to this unthinkable act, his priority was clear. Emma and Sophie needed him now more than ever, and he would move heaven and earth to protect them and help them heal from this trauma. But first, he needed to understand exactly what he was dealing with. The video was still playing, and Victoria had more revelations that would shake the very foundation of everything Michael thought he knew about his life. Michael stepped into the hallway, closing the bedroom door quietly behind him. His daughters were finally safe and sleeping, but his hands continued to shake as he held the phone. Victoria's image on the screen seemed to mock him. Her perfectly applied makeup and designer clothes, a stark contrast to the cruelty of her words. He pressed play again, steeling himself for whatever else she had to say. The yacht cabin behind her was luxurious, with polished wood paneling and brass fixtures that spoke of serious money. This wasn't some weekend rental. This was a vessel worth millions. "I know you're probably wondering about the accommodations," Victoria continued in the video, gesturing casually around the opulent space. "Your dear friend David has been so generous with his hospitality. In fact, he's been generous in many ways over the years." Michael's blood pressure spiked at the mention of David Richardson, his business partner and closest friend since college. They'd built Thomson Richardson Pharmaceuticals together, from a shared dorm room idea into a multi-billion-dollar empire. David was supposed to be managing operations while Michael was in Tokyo, and he was also the girl's godfather. "Oh, that look on your face," Victoria laughed, as if she could see through the camera. "Yes, darling. David and I have been enjoying each other's company for quite some time now. Every business trip you took, every late night at the office, every weekend conference, and we put that time to such good use." The phone nearly slipped from Michael's grip. 3 years. Victoria was claiming they'd been having an affair for 3 years. Every family barbecue, every holiday gathering, every time David had been in their home playing the role of devoted friend and godfather, it had all been an elaborate lie. The girls never suspected a thing. Victoria continued with disturbing cheerfulness. "Children are so trusting, aren't they? They absolutely adored their Uncle David. It made things quite convenient when I needed someone to keep them occupied while David and I had our private moments." Michael had to pause the video and lean against the wall, his chest tight with rage and betrayal. The sacred spaces of his home, his marriage, his friendship, all of it had been violated while he worked tirelessly to provide for his family. Every achievement, every milestone in building their company had been tainted by this deception. He forced himself to continue watching. Victoria reached for something off camera and held up a stack of documents and what appeared to be a tablet computer. "Now about our financial arrangements," she said, her tone becoming more businesslike. "I've taken the liberty of liquidating several accounts. The girls' college funds, your precious family trust, and quite a substantial portion of our joint holdings. Consider it compensation for 8 years of playing house." Michael's mind raced as he tried to calculate the numbers. The twins' educational trusts alone held over $2 million, money that had been carefully invested since their birth. The family trust, established by his grandfather, contained another $4 million in blue-chip stocks and real estate holdings. If Victoria had somehow gained access to those funds— "I know what you're thinking," Victoria said, as if reading his thoughts. "How could I possibly access money that was so carefully protected?" "Well, darling, that's where your dear friend David proved especially useful. Having a business partner with signing authority certainly simplified matters." The revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. David had co-signing privileges on several company accounts, including the Family Trust Management Fund. It was a safeguard they'd put in place years ago, ensuring that if something happened to one of them, the other could protect their family's interests. Michael had never imagined that protection would be turned against him. "The children's passports were particularly easy to obtain," Victoria continued, holding up 2 small blue booklets. "Amazing how many doors open when you have the right documentation And a convincing story about a surprise family vacation? Michael's heart stopped. If Victoria had the girls' passports, it meant she'd been planning this for months, possibly longer. The level of premeditation involved in this betrayal was staggering. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, or even an affair that had gotten out of hand. This was a calculated demolition of his family. "By the time you're watching this," Victoria said, checking what appeared to be an expensive watch on her wrist, "David and I will be well beyond the reach of any inconvenient legal complications. International waters have such wonderful advantages for people in our situation." The video showed Victoria standing up and moving toward what looked like a porthole. Through the circular window, Michael could see nothing but endless blue ocean, confirming his worst fears. They were indeed in international waters, probably on a yacht large enough to cross oceans comfortably. "I suppose you're wondering about the children," Victoria said, turning back to the camera with an expression of mild annoyance. "Honestly, Michael, they were becoming such a burden. All that neediness, all those demands for attention and affection, it was exhausting. I did try to be a good mother for your sake, but frankly, maternal instincts were never part of my skill set." Michael had to pause the video again, this time to check on the girls. He opened their bedroom door a crack and saw them still sleeping peacefully, Sophie's arm draped protectively over Emma. The innocent trust in their sleeping faces made Victoria's words even more monstrous. "I left them outside because I needed them out of the way, while I made final preparations," Victoria continued when Michael resumed the video. "I told them it was punishment for some imaginary transgression, and they believed me completely. Children are so wonderfully gullible." The casual cruelty in her voice made Michael's stomach turn. She was describing the psychological torture of two 8-year-old children, as if she were discussing a minor inconvenience. "I had planned to leave them with Mrs. Rodriguez, but the woman became quite hysterical when she realized what was happening. She actually threatened to call the police if I went through with my plans. Can you imagine? A housekeeper trying to blackmail me?" Michael's respect for Maria Rodriguez, already enormous, grew even deeper. The woman had tried to protect his daughters, even knowing it would cost her job and possibly her immigration status. "So I dismissed her immediately, of course," Victoria said with a wave of her hand. "I told her that if she interfered or contacted anyone, I'd have her deported within 24 hours. The poor thing was terrified. Apparently, she has family members whose legal status is somewhat questionable." The video showed Victoria sitting back down, her expression becoming more serious. "Now, Michael, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. David and I have put considerable thought into our future plans, and those plans do not include any inconvenient entanglements from our past lives." Michael's grip tightened on the phone as Victoria leaned closer to the camera, her blue eyes cold and calculating. "I've left certain documents with our lawyer, well, my lawyer now, that paint a very unflattering picture of your fitness as a father. There are allegations of emotional abuse, neglect, and abandonment. If you attempt to pursue us or interfere with our new life in any way, those documents will be filed with the appropriate authorities." The threat was clear, and Michael realized that Victoria and David had been planning this systematic destruction for much longer than he'd imagined. They'd constructed an elaborate web of lies and false evidence, positioning themselves to escape while leaving him to deal with the wreckage. "The children will be better off without me anyway," Victoria said, her voice taking on a mockingly sympathetic tone. "I was never cut out for motherhood, and they deserve better than a mother who resents their very existence. Consider this my gift to them and to you." As the video neared its end, Victoria stood up again, smoothing down her designer dress. "Oh, and Michael, don't bother trying to trace this transmission. We're using equipment that's quite beyond the reach of conventional tracking methods. David was always so clever with technology." She paused at the cabin door, turning back to the camera with a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "Take good care of our daughters, darling. They're your responsibility now, completely and forever." The video ended abruptly, leaving Michael staring at a black screen in the quiet hallway of his home. The silence felt oppressive after Victoria's devastating revelations, broken only by the sound of rain still pattering against the windows and the gentle breathing of his sleeping daughters. Michael sank down onto the hallway bench, his mind struggling to process the magnitude of what had just been revealed. His wife of 8 years was gone, along with his best friend and business partner. They'd stolen millions of dollars, destroyed his family, and abandoned 2 innocent children. But perhaps most devastating of all, they'd been planning this betrayal for years, laughing at his trust, while systematically dismantling everything he'd worked to build. He thought about all the times David had been in their home, all the family dinners and birthday celebrations, all the moments when Michael had confided his hopes and fears for his daughter's future. Every conversation, every shared meal, every expression of friendship had been a lie. The sound of movement from the girls' room brought Michael back to the present. He stood up quickly, wiping his eyes and composing himself before going to check on them. Emma was sitting up in bed, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "Daddy, is everything okay? I heard you talking." Michael sat down on the edge of the bed, reaching out to smooth Emma's still damp hair. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Daddy was just making some phone calls. How are you feeling?" "Better," Emma said, though her voice was still small and uncertain. "My tummy doesn't hurt anymore and I'm warm now." "Good," Michael said, kissing her forehead. "You and Sophie sleep as long as you need to. When you wake up, we'll make pancakes and talk about what we're going to do next." As Emma settled back down next to her sister, Michael made a silent promise to himself and to his daughters. Whatever it took, however long it required, he would rebuild their lives and help them heal from this trauma. Victoria and David might have destroyed his trust and stolen his money, but they hadn't broken his spirit or his love for his children. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight his daughters were safe, warm, and loved. That was enough for now. Michael woke before dawn, having barely slept despite his exhaustion. Every time he'd closed his eyes, images of his daughters huddled under the oak tree in the rain haunted him. He'd spent the night in the chair beside their bed, watching over them and trying to make sense of the catastrophe his life had become. The first priority was confirming the extent of the financial damage. Michael carefully extracted himself from the bedroom and went downstairs to his study, a mahogany-paneled room that had always been his sanctuary. Now it felt like a war room where he would plan his family's survival. He powered up his computer and began accessing their various accounts. What he discovered made his stomach clench with each new revelation. Victoria hadn't been exaggerating in her video. She and David had been methodical in their theft. The joint checking account showed a balance of $347, down from its usual $50,000 cushion. The girls' college funds were completely empty, and the family trust showed a series of substantial withdrawals over the past 6 months. Michael printed out every statement and transaction record he could access, creating a paper trail of the systematic looting of his family's financial security. As he worked, his phone rang constantly. Calls from the Tokyo office wanting to discuss contract details, messages from colleagues congratulating him on the successful deal, voicemails from David's assistant asking about schedule coordination. Each ring felt like mockery. While he'd been in Japan securing what he thought was his family's future, that very family was being destroyed by the 2 people he trusted most in the world. At 7 o'clock, Michael heard movement from upstairs. He quickly gathered the financial documents and locked them in his desk drawer before going to check on the girls. He found them awake, but still curled together in Emma's bed, speaking in whispers. "Good morning, my beautiful girls," he said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "How did you sleep?" "Better than the tree," Sophie said matter-of-factly, which broke Michael's heart all over again. That his 8-year-old daughter was comparing her sleep to nights spent outdoors in the rain was a reality he was still struggling to accept. "Are you hungry? We could make those pancakes I promised." Emma nodded eagerly, but Sophie remained quiet, her thumb finding its way to her mouth, a habit she'd broken years ago. Michael recognized it as a regression, a sign of the psychological trauma she was processing. In the kitchen, Michael attempted to create some normalcy by making breakfast from scratch. The girls sat at the island counter, watching his every move with an intensity that spoke to their fear of being left alone again. Every time he turned to reach for something from the refrigerator or pantry, their eyes followed him, and he could see the panic that flashed across their faces if he was out of sight for more than a few seconds. "Daddy," Emma said as he flipped pancakes, "why did Mommy leave us outside? We tried to be good, but we couldn't remember what we did wrong." Michael set down the spatula and turned to face his daughters. knowing that this conversation would set the tone for how they process this trauma for years to come. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, moving closer so he could look directly into their eyes. "You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing at all. Sometimes adults make very bad choices, and those choices have nothing to do with the children around them. Mommy left because of problems inside her, not because of anything you did or didn't do." "But she said we were bad," Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. "She was wrong," Michael said firmly. "You are good girls. You are wonderful, smart, brave, and beautiful girls, and nothing Mommy said or did changes that truth." As they ate breakfast, Michael's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Mr. Thompson? This is Dr. Patricia Chen from Greenwich Hospital. We have a Maria Rodriguez here, who was brought in early this morning. She's been asking for you." Michael's heart leaped. Mrs. Rodriguez was alive and safe. "Is she okay?" "What happened?" "She's physically fine, just exhausted and dehydrated. She was found by police early this morning in her car in the hospital parking lot. She'd been sitting there all night, apparently afraid to go home or contact anyone. She keeps asking about Emma and Sophie." "We'll be right there," Michael said, grabbing his keys. "Girls, we're going to see Mrs. Rodriguez." The drive to the hospital was the first time the twins had been in a car since their ordeal, and Michael could see their anxiety spiking. They pressed close together in the back seat, Sophie reaching for Emma's hand as they pulled out of the driveway. "Are we going away?" Emma asked, her voice tight with fear. "No, sweetheart. We're just going to see Mrs. Rodriguez, and then we're coming straight home. I promise you, we're always coming home together." At the hospital, Michael had to carry Sophie, who had become overwhelmed by the institutional smell and bright fluorescent lights. Emma walked close beside him, her hand gripping his jacket. When they found Mrs. Rodriguez's room, the older woman broke down in tears at the sight of them. "Miss Niñas, my girls," she sobbed, reaching out to embrace them. "I tried to stop her, Mr. Michael. I tried to take them with me, but she said she would call immigration, and I have my sister's children to think about." "Maria, you don't need to explain anything," Michael said, feeling a profound gratitude toward this woman who had risked everything to try to protect his daughters. "You did nothing wrong." Mrs. Rodriguez spent the next hour telling Michael everything she'd witnessed in the days leading up to Victoria's departure. How Victoria had been making mysterious phone calls in Spanish, thinking Maria wouldn't understand. How she'd caught Victoria photographing important documents and family heirlooms. How Victoria had become increasingly irritated with the children, snapping at them for normal childhood behavior. She kept getting deliveries, Mrs. Rodriguez said. Big boxes, like someone was moving. But she made me stay away when they came. And Mr. David, he was here more and more, always when you were traveling. They would send the girls to their room and talk in whispers. Each detail added another piece to the puzzle of betrayal that Michael was trying to solve. Victoria and David hadn't just stolen his money and destroyed his family. They'd turned his own home into a staging ground for their deception. After leaving the hospital, with Mrs. Rodriguez promising to return to work as soon as she was discharged, Michael drove to the offices of his attorney, James Morrison. The girls came with him, still unwilling to be separated from their father for even a few minutes. Morrison, a distinguished man in his 60s, who had handled Michael's legal affairs for years, listened to the story with growing alarm. He took notes as Michael described the video, the missing money, and Victoria's legal threats. "And Michael, this is far more serious than a simple marital dispute," Morrison said, glancing at the twins who were coloring quietly in the corner of his office. "What you're describing sounds like a coordinated financial conspiracy. David's involvement as your business partner makes this particularly complex. What are my options?" Michael asked, keeping his voice low. "We need to act quickly on several fronts," Morrison said, pulling out a legal pad. "First, we'll freeze any remaining joint accounts and file for emergency custody of the children. Second, we need to examine every business transaction David has been involved with over the past year. If he's been stealing from the company, we may be able to recover some assets." Morrison paused, his expression growing more serious. "But I have to warn you, Michael. If Victoria has indeed filed false allegations of abuse or neglect, we're going to be fighting an uphill battle. The family court system tends to be very cautious about children's welfare, and false accusations can be incredibly damaging." That afternoon, Michael received a call that confirmed his worst fears. Victoria's attorney, a high-powered family law specialist from Manhattan, had indeed filed papers with the Connecticut Superior Court. The allegations were devastating: emotional abuse, child endangerment, abandonment, and claims that Michael's work schedule had left the children essentially orphaned. "They're seeking emergency custody," Morrison explained over the phone. "They're claiming that Victoria had to flee for her safety and the children's safety, and that she's prepared to return to Connecticut to fight for custody once proper protective measures are in place." Michael stared out the window of his study at the oak tree where his daughters had suffered for 3 days, abandoned by the very woman who was now claiming to be their protector. The irony was staggering, but the legal threat was very real. "James, they recorded video evidence of her abandoning the children. They were outside for 3 days in September weather, surviving on rainwater and berries. We'll fight this, Michael, but you need to understand that family court cases can drag on for months or even years. In the meantime, we need to focus on documenting everything: the children's medical condition, their psychological state, Mrs. Rodriguez's testimony, financial records, everything." That evening, as Michael tucked his daughters into bed, they still refused to sleep separately, he made another silent promise. Victoria and David might have the advantage of preparation and resources, but they had underestimated one crucial factor: a father's love for his children was a force more powerful than any legal maneuvering or stolen money. "Daddy," Emma said as he turned off the light, "are you going to leave us too?" "Never," Michael said, kissing both their foreheads. "I will never ever leave you. We're going to get through this together, and we're going to be okay." As he closed their bedroom door, Michael knew that the real battle was just beginning. But looking at his daughters' faces, seeing their trust despite everything they'd endured, he felt a strength he didn't know he possessed. Victoria and David had taken his money, his marriage, and his faith in human nature, but they had not broken his family. If anything, they had revealed what truly mattered. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of legal meetings, doctor's appointments, and careful reconstruction of daily life. Michael had transformed his home office into a command center, with whiteboards tracking court dates, financial recovery efforts, and most importantly, his daughter's emotional progress. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the child psychologist James Morrison had recommended, became a regular presence in their lives. A warm woman in her 40s with an infectious smile, she specialized in childhood trauma and had extensive experience with cases involving parental abandonment. "The girls are showing classic signs of attachment disruption," Dr. Mitchell explained to Michael during one of their sessions. "The fact that their mother deliberately caused them to feel unsafe in their own home has created a profound trust issue. They need to feel secure before they can begin processing what happened." Michael watched through the observation window as Dr. Mitchell worked with Emma and Sophie in her play therapy room. Emma was more verbal about her feelings, asking direct questions about why their mother had left and whether it was somehow their fault. Sophie, however, had retreated into selective mutism, speaking only to Emma and occasionally to Michael in whispers. "Sophie's silence is her way of maintaining control," Dr. Mitchell continued. "If she doesn't speak to new people, she doesn't risk being hurt by them. It's actually a very intelligent coping mechanism for an 8-year-old. What worried Michael most was Sophie's relationship with food. She would only eat meals that he prepared himself, and only if Emma ate first. Dr. Mitchell explained that this was another control mechanism. Sophie was making sure the food was safe by watching her sister. "How long will this last?" Michael asked, his heart breaking as he watched Sophie push away the sandwich Mrs. Rodriguez had lovingly prepared. "Every child is different," Dr. Mitchell said gently. "But with consistent care, patience, and the kind of devoted attention you're providing, most children begin to show improvement within 3 to 6 months. The key is predictability and safety." Michael had already made the most important changes to ensure that safety. He'd stepped back from day-to-day operations at Thompson Richardson Pharmaceuticals, delegating management to his senior team while he focused on his daughters. The irony wasn't lost on him that the company he'd built to secure his family's future was now secondary to actually saving his family. Mrs. Rodriguez had returned to work with renewed dedication, moving into the main house so she could provide round-the-clock support. Her presence was crucial. She represented continuity and safety for the girls, a link to their life before the trauma. "Mr. Michael," she said one morning as they prepared breakfast together, "I think Miss Sophie is getting a little better. Yesterday she asked me to teach her how to make empanadas like her abuela." It was a small sign, but Michael seized on it hopefully. Sophie's grandmother had passed away 2 years earlier, and empanadas had been their special tradition together. If Sophie was ready to engage with those memories, it might signal emotional progress. The legal situation, however, continued to deteriorate. Victoria's lawyers had filed a flurry of motions, each one more outrageous than the last. They were now claiming that Michael had been psychologically abusive to Victoria throughout their marriage, forcing her to maintain a facade of happy family life while he controlled every aspect of her existence. They're trying to create a narrative where Victoria is the victim. James Morrison explained during one of their strategy sessions. According to their filing, she was trapped in an emotionally abusive marriage and had to flee for her psychological safety. "What about the video evidence?" Michael asked. "She literally confessed to abandoning the children and stealing the money. They're claiming the video was made under duress, that she was being coerced by an unnamed third party. They're saying she had to make those statements to protect herself, and that her real plan was to return for the children once she'd established a safe environment." Michael slammed his hand on the conference table, frustration boiling over. "That's complete fabrication. She was on a yacht with David, bragging about the affair and the theft." "I know, Michael, but family court operates differently than criminal court. The burden of proof is different, and judges are trained to err on the side of caution when it comes to children's welfare. Victoria's team is very experienced at exploiting those tendencies." The most disturbing development came when Victoria's lawyers submitted what they claimed were DNA test results, questioning Michael's paternity of the twins. The documents, bearing official laboratory letterheads, suggested that Michael was not the biological father of either Emma or Sophie. "This is impossible," Michael told Morrison, staring at the lab reports in disbelief. "I was present at their conception, their birth, everything. They look exactly like my mother did at their age. The tests could be falsified," Morrison said carefully, "but we'll need to conduct our own independent testing to prove that. In the meantime, these documents will complicate our custody case significantly." That evening, Michael sat with Dr. Mitchell, discussing how to handle the DNA testing with the girls. The idea of subjecting them to more medical procedures when they were already struggling felt like another violation, but legally it was necessary. "We can make it as non-invasive as possible," Dr. Mitchell suggested. "A simple cheek swab done here in my office where they feel safe. We'll frame it as just another part of the legal process. Nothing more dramatic than that." What Michael didn't tell Dr. Mitchell was that the paternity challenge had shaken him more than he cared to admit. Not because he doubted his relationship to his daughters, their resemblance to his family was unmistakable, but because it revealed the depths of Victoria's manipulation. If she was willing to fabricate DNA evidence, what other lies had she constructed around their marriage? 2 days later, Michael received a call that changed everything. James Morrison's voice was tight with controlled excitement when he reached Michael at home. "Michael, I need you to come to my office immediately. Bring Mrs. Rodriguez if she's available. We've had a breakthrough." "What kind of breakthrough?" "I can't discuss it over the phone, but it involves David Richardson and some very interesting information about Victoria's background." "How quickly can you get here?" Michael arranged for Dr. Mitchell to stay with the girls for an emergency session, while he and Mrs. Rodriguez rushed to Morrison's office. What they found there was a man Michael had never seen before, tall, lean, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent years in law enforcement. "Michael, this is Detective Robert Hayes, retired NYPD. He's been working as a private investigator on a case that intersects with yours in some very unexpected ways." Detective Hayes opened a thick file, folder, and spread photographs across the conference table. Michael's blood ran cold when he recognized Victoria's face in several of the images. But she looked different. Darker hair, different clothing, sometimes with different men. "Your wife," Hayes said, his voice carrying the flat authority of years in law enforcement, "is not who she claimed to be. Her real name is Vivian Crawford, and she's been running marriage scams across 3 states for the past 15 years. Mrs. Rodriguez gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered in Spanish. Her accent, the way she spoke sometimes, it wasn't right. Hayes continued laying out photographs and documents. She targets wealthy men, typically entrepreneurs or professionals with substantial assets, but demanding careers that keep them traveling. She studies them for months before making contact, learning their routines, their weaknesses, their financial situations. "How many others?" Michael asked, his voice barely steady. "That we know of? 7 confirmed cases over the past decade. 3 of those men lost everything and had to declare bankruptcy. 1 suffered a complete nervous breakdown and required hospitalization. Another..." Hayes paused, glancing at Morrison before continuing. "Another took his own life 6 months after she disappeared with his children and life savings." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Michael wasn't just dealing with a cheating wife and a dishonest business partner. He was dealing with a professional, criminal who had destroyed multiple families and had apparently driven at least one man to the ultimate despair. "The children," Michael said suddenly. "Are Emma and Sophie even her biological children?" Hayes shuffled through more documents. "That's what we're still investigating. We've found birth certificates for at least 3 different children associated with Vivian Crawford's various identities, but the DNA evidence suggests some of those children were likely obtained through illegal adoption schemes or surrogacy arrangements that she later abandoned." Mrs. Rodriguez was crying now, great silent tears streaming down her face. "Those poor babies," she whispered. "No wonder they were so hungry for love, so desperate to please. They probably felt something was wrong but couldn't understand what." "Detective Hayes," Morrison said, "tell Michael about David Richardson." Hayes pulled out another set of documents. "Your business partner appears to be Vivian's most recent recruit. We believe she seduced him specifically to gain access to your company's financial systems. Phone records show they've been in contact for over a year, predating any romantic relationship by months." "David's been planning this for a year?" Michael asked, feeling his world shift again. "Based on our investigation, yes. We found evidence that Vivian researched your company extensively before ever meeting your business partner. She knew about your travel schedule, your family trust, even your daughter's education funds. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a targeted operation." As Michael absorbed this information, he felt a strange mixture of devastation and relief. The woman he'd married, the mother he'd thought abandoned his children, had never really existed. Emma and Sophie had been victims of an elaborate criminal conspiracy, not unwanted children cast aside by their biological mother. "What's our next step?" Michael asked. "We take this evidence to the district attorney," Morrison said. "Vivian Crawford is looking at federal charges for fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. David Richardson will face similar charges, plus embezzlement and conspiracy. The custody case becomes significantly simpler when the person claiming parental rights is a documented criminal using a false identity." For the first time in weeks, Michael felt something approaching hope. The legal battle wasn't over, but now he had powerful weapons to fight back. More importantly, he had answers to give his daughters about why their world had been turned upside down. It wasn't because they were unlovable or because they'd done something wrong. It was because they'd been targeted by a predator who saw them only as tools to exploit their father. As he drove home to Emma and Sophie, Michael realized that while this revelation explained the deliberate cruelty they'd experienced, it also meant their healing could begin from a place of truth rather than confusion. They hadn't been abandoned by a mother who couldn't love them. They'd been victimized by a criminal who was incapable of love for anyone. Michael sat in his car outside Dr. Mitchell's office for several minutes, trying to process the magnitude of what he'd just learned. Detective Hayes had given him a thick folder containing evidence of Vivian Crawford's criminal history, and each page revealed new layers of deception and manipulation that made his stomach turn. Inside the office, he could see Emma and Sophie through the window, working on an art project with Dr. Mitchell. They looked so innocent, so trusting, completely unaware that their entire early childhood had been orchestrated by a woman who viewed them as nothing more than tools in an elaborate criminal scheme. When Michael finally went inside, Dr. Mitchell immediately noticed his expression. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Michael said, watching his daughters carefully glue construction paper to poster board. "Can we talk privately for a moment?" Dr. Mitchell led him to her consultation room, closing the door behind them. Michael spread some of the photographs from Detective Hayes' file across her desk, watching her face change as she recognized the woman they'd all known as Victoria. "This is why the girls' attachment issues were so severe," Dr. Mitchell said after Michael explained the investigation's findings. "Children have an intuitive sense when something is fundamentally wrong with their primary caregiver. They've been living with chronic emotional confusion, loving someone who was incapable of genuine love in return." "How do I tell them?" Michael asked. "How do I explain that the woman they called Mommy was essentially a stranger using them to commit fraud?" Dr. Mitchell considered this carefully. At their age, the details of criminal activity would be overwhelming and frightening. What they need to understand is that the person who hurt them was sick in a way that had nothing to do with them. We focus on the fact that they're safe now, that their real family is the people who truly love them. "Their real family," Michael repeated. "Mrs. Rodriguez has been more of a mother to them than Victoria ever was." "Exactly. And that's what we build on, the relationships that are genuine, consistent, and loving." When they returned to the girls, Emma immediately ran to Michael, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Daddy, look what we made!" She held up a poster covered with drawings of their house, stick figures representing their family, and a large rainbow arcing over everything. "It's beautiful." "Sweetheart," Michael said, genuinely moved by the artwork, "tell me about it." "That's you and me and Sophie." Emma pointed to 3 stick figures holding hands. "And that's Mrs. Rodriguez making empanadas. And that's Dr. Mitchell helping us feel better. And the rainbow is because after storms come rainbows." Sophie nodded silently, but pointed to another figure she'd drawn slightly apart from the others. "Bad lady," she whispered, the first word she'd spoken to anyone other than Emma or Michael in weeks. Dr. Mitchell and Michael exchanged glances. Even in her limited verbal expression, Sophie was processing the concept that the woman who'd hurt them was separate from their real family. That evening, Michael called an emergency meeting with his senior management team. The revelation about David's criminal involvement meant that every business decision, every financial transaction, and every strategic plan from the past year was potentially compromised. "We need to conduct a complete forensic audit," Michael told his CFO, Patricia Wong, and his head of security, Marcus Johnson. "Every account David had access to, every contract he negotiated, every vendor relationship he managed. We have to assume that everything was potentially part of this conspiracy." The audit results, delivered 48 hours later, were staggering. David had systematically siphoned nearly $3 million from various company accounts over the past 18 months, using a complex web of shell companies and false invoices. He'd also sold confidential research data to competitors, potentially costing the company tens of millions in lost competitive advantage. "The good news," Patricia Wong reported, "is that most of the stolen funds are traceable. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit has frozen several offshore accounts linked to the shell companies. We should be able to recover the majority of what was taken." "And the bad news?" Michael asked. "The research data theft will require extensive legal action against our competitors who purchased the information. That process could take years and might not recover any damages." Despite the business complications, Michael's primary focus remained on his daughter's recovery. Dr. Mitchell had suggested maintaining as normal a routine as possible, while gradually introducing new experiences that would help rebuild their confidence and trust. Mrs. Rodriguez had become instrumental in this process. Her warm maternal presence provided the stability the girls desperately needed, and her cooking had become a bridge for Sophie's relationship with food. Each day, Sophie became a little more willing to try new dishes, especially if she helped prepare them herself. "Cooking gives her a sense of control," Dr. Mitchell explained. "She can see every ingredient, participate in every step, and make choices about what she eats. It's therapeutic." Emma, meanwhile, had begun expressing herself through art with remarkable intensity. Her drawings evolved from simple family portraits to complex scenes depicting her emotions and experiences. Dr. Mitchell encouraged this outlet, recognizing it as Emma's way of processing trauma and regaining narrative control over her life. 3 weeks after Detective Hayes' revelation, Michael received a call that would change their legal situation dramatically. James Morrison's voice was triumphant when he delivered the news. "Michael, the federal investigators have made arrests. Vivian Crawford and David Richardson were apprehended on a yacht off the coast of the Bahamas. They're being extradited to face charges in Connecticut and New York." Michael felt a surge of satisfaction, mixed with relief. "What does this mean for our custody case?" "It's over," Morrison said simply. "Vivian Crawford has no legal standing to claim parental rights under a false identity. The DNA tests we conducted confirmed what we already knew. You are unquestionably Emma and Sophie's biological father. Combined with the criminal charges and evidence of child endangerment, the family court has dismissed all claims against you." That evening, Michael sat down with his daughters for what Dr. Mitchell had helped him prepare as the truth conversation. He'd practiced this moment for days, knowing that how he handled it would affect their healing for years to come. "Girls, I need to tell you something very important about the lady who used to live with us," he began, sitting cross-legged on the floor of their playroom so he could be at their eye level. Emma and Sophie moved closer, sensing the gravity of the moment. Sophie hadn't spoken much, but she'd been more present lately, more engaged with the world around her. "The lady we called Mommy wasn't really your Mommy," Michael said gently. "She was a person who was very sick in her heart and mind, and she pretended to be part of our family to try to take things that didn't belong to her." Emma's brow furrowed in concentration. "Like a bad guy in a movie?" "Yes, something like that. But the important thing is that she's gone now, and she can never hurt you again. The police caught her, and she has to stay away from all families forever." Sophie spoke for the second time in weeks, her voice barely audible. "We didn't make her leave." "Oh, sweetheart, no," Michael said, gathering both girls into a fierce hug. "You didn't make her do anything bad. She was already sick when she came to our family. Nothing you did or said or thought made any difference. She left because that's what sick people like her do. They hurt families and then they run away." "But we're safe now?" Emma asked. "You're completely safe," Michael said firmly. "Our real family is me and you two, and Mrs. Rodriguez and Dr. Mitchell and all the people who truly love you. And real families don't abandon each other. Real families take care of each other forever." Sophie surprised everyone by speaking again, her voice stronger this time. "Mrs. Rodriguez is like a real mommy." "Yes, she is," Michael agreed. "Mrs. Rodriguez loves you both very much, and she's chosen to be part of our family. That's what real love looks like. It's a choice people make every day to stay and care for each other." That night, for the first time since the ordeal began, both girls asked to sleep in their own beds in their own room. Michael sat in the hallway outside their door, listening to their whispered conversations and feeling cautiously optimistic about their progress. Emma's voice drifted through the partially open door. "Sophie, do you think we're going to be okay?" Sophie's response was clearer than she'd spoken in months. "Yes, because Daddy loves us for real, and Mrs. Rodriguez loves us for real, and real love doesn't go away." Michael wiped tears from his eyes, overwhelmed by his daughter's wisdom and resilience. Despite everything they'd endured, despite the calculated cruelty they'd experienced, these remarkable little girls were finding their way back to trust and hope. The legal nightmare was ending. The financial situation was being resolved, and most importantly, his daughters were healing. They had a long journey ahead of them, but they were taking it together as a real family, one built on truth, love, and the kind of commitment that couldn't be shaken by any storm. Outside their window, Michael could hear the sound of gentle rain beginning to fall, but this time it was just weather, not a symbol of abandonment and fear. This time they were all safe inside, warm and loved and together. 6 months had passed since that terrible September night when Michael found his daughters under the oak tree. The house in Greenwich had undergone a remarkable transformation, evolving from a place of betrayal and trauma into a genuine home filled with laughter, creativity, and healing. Mrs. Rodriguez had officially moved into the main house, taking over the master suite, while Michael relocated to a smaller bedroom closer to the girls. The change symbolized more than just living arrangements. It represented the restructuring of their family around love and choice rather than obligation and deception. "Mr. Michael," Mrs. Rodriguez said one morning as they prepared breakfast together, "I think it's time we made this official. I want to adopt the girls if you'll let me." Michael paused in cracking eggs, looking at the woman who had become his daughter's anchor. "Maria, you don't need legal papers to be their mother. You already are. But I want them to know it's forever," she said firmly. "I want them to understand that I chose them, that this isn't just a job or temporary arrangement. These are my daughters now, in my heart and in law." The conversation about adoption had been building for weeks. Emma and Sophie had begun calling Mrs. Rodriguez Mama Maria, a title that emerged naturally from their play and stuck with surprising permanence. Dr. Mitchell had encouraged this development, explaining that children's ability to form new attachment bonds was one of their greatest strengths. Emma had blossomed into a remarkably expressive artist. Her bedroom walls were now covered with paintings and drawings that chronicled her emotional journey from darkness to light. The local art teacher, Ms. Jennifer Walsh, had begun visiting weekly to work with Emma on more advanced techniques. "She has genuine talent," Ms. Walsh told Michael after one of their sessions. "But more than that, she has something to say through her art. These pieces tell a story of resilience that could inspire other children who've faced trauma." Sophie's recovery had been different but equally remarkable. Her relationship with food had gradually normalized, and she discovered a passion for cooking that went beyond mere survival. She spent hours in the kitchen with Mrs. Rodriguez, learning traditional Puerto Rican recipes and experimenting with her own creations. "Cooking is Sophie's language now," Dr. Mitchell observed during one of their family sessions. "She's communicating love, control, and creativity through food. It's a powerful form of healing expression." The biggest surprise came when Sophie asked if she could cook for the homeless shelter downtown. Michael had volunteered there occasionally before his marriage to Victoria, but he'd stopped when his business travel increased. Sophie's request rekindled his interest in community service, but this time as a family activity. "Why do you want to cook for people at the shelter?" Michael asked his daughter one evening as she planned menus in her notebook. Sophie considered the question seriously, her 8-year-old face showing wisdom beyond her years. "Because we were hungry and scared and someone should have helped us. Now we can help other people who are hungry and scared." The simple profundity of her answer moved Michael to tears. His daughter had transformed her trauma into empathy, her suffering into service. It was perhaps the most beautiful thing he'd ever witnessed. The family began volunteering at St. Catherine's Shelter every Saturday morning. Emma brought art supplies to run craft activities with the children staying there, while Sophie worked alongside the kitchen staff preparing meals. Mrs. Rodriguez coordinated with the shelter's social workers to identify families who might benefit from their assistance. Michael found himself rediscovering his own sense of purpose through this work. The pharmaceutical company continued to thrive under his more balanced leadership style, but his priorities had fundamentally shifted. Success was no longer measured in profit margins or market share, but in his daughter's laughter, their growing confidence, and their ability to sleep peacefully through the night. Dr. Mitchell had gradually reduced their sessions from twice weekly to monthly check-ins, marking the girls' significant progress in processing their trauma. Both Emma and Sophie had developed healthy coping mechanisms and were showing remarkable resilience. "They're not just surviving," Dr. Mitchell told Michael during one of their consultations. "They're thriving. The stability you've provided, combined with Mrs. Rodriguez's maternal nurturing, has given them a foundation that's actually stronger than many children have who've never experienced trauma." The legal aftermath of Victoria and David's crimes had proceeded smoothly. Both had been convicted on multiple federal charges and sentenced to substantial prison terms. The company had recovered most of the stolen funds, and the family trust had been fully restored with additional security measures in place. More importantly, the DNA tests had conclusively established Michael's paternity and revealed something unexpected. The girls also carried genetic markers that suggested Mrs. Rodriguez's nephew, Carlos, who had lived with their family briefly years ago, might be their biological half-brother. It's possible that Victoria used a sperm donor with similar genetic background to yours, Dr. Mitchell explained when the results came in. It would have been part of her long-term strategy to ensure the children looked like they could plausibly be your biological offspring. The revelation didn't change Michael's feelings about his daughters. They were his in every way that mattered, but it did provide another connection to Mrs. Rodriguez that felt like destiny rather than coincidence. Carlos, now 15 and living in Boston with his mother, had begun visiting on weekends. The instant bond he formed with Emma and Sophie was remarkable to witness. He was gentle with their trauma history, while also treating them like normal little sisters, striking exactly the right balance. Having Carlos around is perfect for them, Dr. Mitchell observed. He represents safety, family connection, and the possibility of normal sibling relationships. It's another piece of healthy family structure. One evening in March, as Michael was reading bedtime stories to the girls in their room, Sophie made an announcement that stopped him mid-sentence. "Daddy, I want to write a cookbook for kids who are sad," she said matter-of-factly, "with recipes that make people feel better, like Mama Maria's empanadas and the soup you made when we were cold." Emma immediately bounced with excitement. "And I could draw pictures for it, pictures of families cooking together and feeling happy." Michael looked at his daughters, Sophie with her serious expression and determination, Emma with her infectious enthusiasm and artistic vision, and felt his heart swell with pride. These remarkable children had taken their worst experiences and were transforming them into gifts for other children who might be suffering. "That sounds like a wonderful project," he said. "We could work on it together, all of us. Mama Maria could help with the recipes, Emma could create the illustrations, and I could help with the writing. And Carlos could test the recipes," Sophie added practically, "to make sure they taste good to kids." Over the following weeks, the cookbook project became a family obsession. Sophie developed simple, comforting recipes with funny names like Brave Bear Soup and Happy Heart Pancakes. Emma created whimsical illustrations that showed diverse families cooking together, always emphasizing warmth, safety, and love. Mrs. Rodriguez contributed traditional recipes with cultural significance, explaining the stories behind each dish and how food could connect people to their heritage and each other. Michael helped organize the content and reached out to Dr. Mitchell for guidance on incorporating therapeutic elements. "This project is itself therapeutic," Dr. Mitchell explained. "They're taking control of their narrative, creating something positive from their experience, and potentially helping other children. It's a perfect example of post-traumatic growth." The local newspaper got wind of the project and wanted to do a feature story. Michael was initially hesitant about publicity, but Emma and Sophie were excited about the possibility of reaching more children who might need comfort food and art therapy. "We want other kids to know they can feel better," Emma explained to the reporter, with the confidence of a child who had indeed felt better. "Even when really bad things happen, families can help you get happy again." Sophie nodded seriously and added, "And good food always helps. Food is like a hug on the inside." The article titled "From Trauma to Triumph: How Two Sisters Are Cooking Up Healing" ran on the front page of the Greenwich Times Sunday edition. The response was overwhelming. Emails from families across the country sharing their own stories, requests for the cookbook from social workers and therapists, and offers of support from publishers interested in bringing the project to a wider audience. One email particularly moved Michael. It was from a woman in California whose children had been abandoned by their father. She wrote, "Reading about Emma and Sophie gave my kids hope that they can be happy again. We've started cooking together every night now, and my youngest daughter, who hadn't spoken much since her father left, asked if we could make Brave Bear Soup together. Thank you for showing us that broken families can become even stronger families." As spring turned to summer, the Thompson-Rodriguez household had found its rhythm. Michael had restructured his work schedule to be home every evening for dinner, weekend activities, and bedtime stories. Mrs. Rodriguez had completed the legal adoption process, making her officially the girl's mother, alongside Michael's fatherhood. Emma's artwork had caught the attention of a gallery owner who specialized in therapeutic art programs for children. She'd been invited to participate in a group exhibition focusing on resilience and recovery, with proceeds benefiting children's trauma counseling programs. Sophie had begun teaching cooking classes for other children at the community center, always emphasizing the emotional comfort that came from preparing and sharing meals with people you love. The oak tree in their yard, once a symbol of abandonment and fear, had become the girls' favorite place to play. They'd asked Michael to hang a swing from its strongest branch, and on warm evenings, the whole family would gather under its shade to share stories and plan their next adventure. "Daddy," Emma said one evening as they watched the sunset from beneath the oak tree, "do you think other kids who are scared could come visit us sometime? So we can show them how to be happy again." Michael looked at his daughter, confident, creative, and filled with compassion, and realized that her traumatic experience had been transformed into a superpower, the ability to help other children heal. "I think that's a beautiful idea. Sweetheart," he said, pulling both girls close, "we have a lot of love to share." As if summoned by their conversation, Mrs. Rodriguez appeared with a tray of fresh-baked cookies and Carlos following behind with his guitar. The impromptu family gathering under the oak tree, with music and laughter, and the scent of baking filling the evening air, felt like a small miracle. The little girls who had once huddled under this tree in fear and confusion were now the heart of a thriving family that had chosen love over biology, service over self-pity, and hope over fear. The transformation was complete, but the story was just beginning. 3 years had passed since that stormy September night that changed everything. The Thompson-Rodriguez family had not only survived their ordeal, but had transformed it into a source of strength that rippled out into their community and beyond. Emma, now 11, had become a recognized young artist whose work was featured in therapy centers and children's hospitals across New England. Her paintings, vibrant with hope and resilience, carried titles like After the Storm and Finding. Family, the local children's museum, had commissioned a permanent installation of her work for their healing arts wing. "My paintings help kids understand that sad feelings don't last forever," Emma explained to a reporter during the museum's opening ceremony. "Even when really scary things happen, you can still find beautiful colors again." Sophie, also 11, had authored 2 children's cookbooks with major publishers. Sophie's Comfort Kitchen and Cooking with Love had become bestsellers in the therapeutic children's literature category. The recipes, designed to be simple enough for children to make with adult supervision, emphasized the emotional comfort that came from preparing and sharing food with loved ones. More remarkably, Sophie had begun speaking at conferences for social workers and child psychologists, sharing her insights about recovery and resilience. Her natural wisdom and matter-of-fact delivery made complex therapeutic concepts accessible to both professionals and families. "Food is how I learned to trust again," she told an audience of child welfare workers at a conference in Boston. "When you cook for someone, you're saying, 'I want to take care of you.' And when someone cooks for you, they're saying, 'You matter to me.' That's how families really work." Michael had restructured Thompson Pharmaceuticals to focus specifically on medications for childhood trauma and mental health disorders. The company's research had led to breakthrough treatments that were helping thousands of children worldwide. Every success in the lab felt personal now, connected to his own daughter's journey toward healing. Mrs. Rodriguez, now legally Maria Thompson Rodriguez, had completed her degree in early childhood development and opened a non-profit organization called Safe Harbor Families. The organization provided emergency housing, counseling, and support services for children who had experienced abandonment or family trauma. The old guest house on their property had been converted into the organization's headquarters, with additional support from Michael's company and donations from families whose lives had been touched by Emma and Sophie's story. Carlos, now 18 and preparing for college, had chosen to study social work with a specialization in family therapy. His experience helping his younger sisters heal had inspired his career path. He planned to work with families in crisis, bringing the same patience and understanding that had made such a difference in Emma and Sophie's recovery. "I learned from watching my sisters that healing isn't about forgetting what happened," Carlos reflected during his college application interview. "It's about choosing to build something beautiful from the broken pieces." The oak tree in their backyard had become the centerpiece of an annual event called Roots and Wings, where families touched by trauma gathered to share their stories of recovery and hope. Local mental health professionals offered free counseling. Children participated in art and cooking therapy workshops, and everyone shared a community meal prepared collectively under the spreading branches. Dr. Mitchell, who had remained an important part of their lives, often pointed to the Thompson-Rodriguez family as an example of post-traumatic growth at its finest. They didn't just overcome their trauma, she explained to other professionals. They used it as a foundation to build something stronger and more beautiful than what existed before. The legal aftermath of Victoria Crawford's crimes had extended far beyond their family. Her conviction had led to the discovery of an entire network of marriage fraud operations, resulting in the arrest of dozens of co-conspirators and the recovery of millions of dollars for victims across multiple states. David Richardson, after serving his sentence, had written letters of apology to Michael and the girls, expressing genuine remorse for his role in their suffering. Michael had chosen to forgive him, not for David's sake, but for his own family's peace of mind. Holding on to anger would have been like poison, Michael explained to his daughters when they asked about forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't mean what he did was okay. It means we're not going to let his bad choices keep hurting us. On a warm September evening, exactly 3 years after their ordeal began, the family gathered under the oak tree for what had become their annual gratitude ceremony. Each family member shared something they were grateful for from the past year, and they lit candles to honor the journey that had brought them together. "I'm grateful that we learned love is a choice," Emma said, holding her candle carefully, "and that the people who choose to love us are our real family." Sophie nodded seriously and added, "I'm grateful that we can help other kids now, and that scary things don't stay scary forever when you have people who love you." Carlos smiled at his sisters and said, "I'm grateful that I got to be part of watching two of the bravest people I know turn their hurt into help for other people." Mrs. Rodriguez wiped tears from her eyes as she spoke. "I'm grateful that God brought me to this family, and that I got to see two broken little girls become two strong young women who make the world better just by being in it." Michael looked at his family, chosen, blended and bound together by love rather than biology, and felt overwhelmed by the journey they'd traveled together. "I'm grateful for second chances," he said finally, "for the opportunity to build a family based on truth and choice and love. And I'm grateful that the worst night of our lives led to the best years of our lives." As they sat together under the stars, Emma pulled out a leather-bound journal that she'd been working on for months. "I want to read something I wrote," she announced. "Once upon a time, there were two little girls who thought they were lost forever. They were cold and scared, and didn't understand why someone who was supposed to love them had hurt them instead. But then their real daddy found them, and their real mama chose them, and their real brother helped them remember how to be happy. They learned that families aren't about who gives birth to you. Families are about who chooses to love you every single day, no matter what." And they lived not quite happily ever after, because real life has sad days too, but they lived bravely ever after, and loved ever after, and helped other people ever after. The end. The simple story, told in an 11-year-old's voice but carrying the wisdom of hard-won experience, perfectly captured their family's journey from tragedy to triumph. As the evening wound down and they began gathering the candles and blankets, Sophie made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I want to find the other kids," she said quietly, "the ones from the bad lady's other families. I want to cook for them and make sure they're okay." Detective Hayes had mentioned during the trial that Victoria Crawford had left other children behind in previous schemes, some of whom had been placed in foster care or with relatives when their fathers couldn't cope with the aftermath of her crimes. "That's a big project, sweetheart," Michael said gently. "Are you sure you're ready for something like that?" Sophie nodded with the same determination that had helped her survive 3 days under the oak tree. "We know how to help kids who are sad and scared. Maybe they need to know they can have real families too." Over the following months, the family worked with social services and law enforcement to identify and reach out to other children who had been victims of Victoria Crawford's crimes. Not all the families were ready for contact, but several welcomed the connection. A support group emerged, facilitated by Dr. Mitchell and funded by Michael's foundation, specifically for families impacted by marriage fraud schemes. Emma's art therapy techniques and Sophie's cooking therapy methods became central components of the healing program. The ripple effects of their recovery continued to expand. Emma's artwork was featured in a traveling exhibition about childhood resilience that toured children's hospitals nationwide. Sophie's cookbooks were translated into 6 languages and used in therapeutic programs around the world. Most importantly, the Thompson-Rodriguez family had created a model for how love, patience, and commitment could transform trauma into purpose. Their story became a beacon of hope for other families facing seemingly insurmountable challenges. As Emma and Sophie approached their 12th birthday, they had grown into confident, compassionate young women who understood that their difficult beginning had given them unique gifts to share with the world. They had learned that true strength comes not from avoiding pain, but from choosing to transform it into something beautiful. The oak tree that had once witnessed their lowest moment continued to grow stronger each year, its branches reaching higher toward the sky, while its roots grew deeper into the earth. Like the family that gathered beneath it, the tree had weathered its storms and emerged more magnificent than before. On quiet evenings, when the work of helping others was done and the house was peaceful, Michael would sometimes stand at his bedroom window and look out at that tree. He remembered the terrified father who had found his daughters there on that terrible night, and he marveled at how far they had all come. The man who had once built a pharmaceutical empire to secure his family's future had learned that real security came not from money or success, but from the unbreakable bonds of chosen love and shared purpose. His daughters, who had once survived on rainwater and berries, now nourished hundreds of other children with their gifts of art and cooking and hope. Their story had become proof that even the cruelest betrayals could not destroy the human capacity for love, healing, and transformation. From the darkest storm had indeed come the most brilliant rainbow, and its light continued to shine for everyone whose life it touched. Fim de Historia. Dear listeners, we hope Emma and Sophie's story has moved your hearts as much as it has ours. These remarkable sisters show us that even in our darkest moments, love and resilience can create something beautiful. If their journey of healing and hope has touched you, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories of families who chose love over circumstance. You can find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the power of the human spirit. Share with us in the comments what city you're listening from and tell us how this story made you feel. We read every comment, and your responses inspire us to keep sharing these tales of triumph over adversity. Don't miss our upcoming content, where we continue to celebrate the extraordinary strength found in ordinary families. We'll be waiting for you in the comments section. 5 years had passed since Emma and Sophie's story first captured national attention. Now 16 years old, the twins had grown into remarkable young women, whose influence extended far beyond their Greenwich home. Their childhood trauma had been transformed into a powerful force for social change, inspiring legislation and programs that protected vulnerable children across the country. Emma had evolved from a talented child artist into a recognized advocate for art therapy in schools. Her foundation, Colors of Courage, had established art therapy programs in over 200 schools nationwide, specifically targeting children who had experienced family trauma. Her teenage years had brought new challenges, including the typical struggles of adolescence complicated by her unique public profile. "Sometimes I wish I could just be a normal teenager," Emma confided to Dr. Mitchell during one of their monthly sessions. "Everyone expects me to be this symbol of recovery and strength all the time. But some days I just want to paint silly pictures and complain about homework like other kids." Dr. Mitchell nodded understandingly. "It's completely normal to feel that pressure, Emma. Your story has helped so many people, but you're still allowed to be 16 and imperfect, and sometimes frustrated with the world." Sophie had channeled her culinary talents into a different but equally impactful direction. Her non-profit organization, Nourishing Hearts, operated mobile kitchens that provided meals and cooking therapy to homeless families and children in crisis. At 16, she was already being courted by culinary schools and had published her 3rd cookbook. This one focused on teaching teenagers to cook as a form of stress relief and self-care. "Cooking saved my life," Sophie explained to a group of high school students during a demonstration at their school. When everything felt out of control, the kitchen was the one place where I could create something good, something that made people happy. Food is love in action. The success of their individual projects had strengthened rather than divided the twins. They complemented each other perfectly. Emma's artistic vision inspiring Sophie's practical applications, Sophie's grounded wisdom balancing Emma's creative intensity. Michael watched his daughters navigate their teenage years with a mixture of pride and protective concern. Their public roles as advocates and authors meant they received hundreds of letters and emails from other trauma survivors, some sharing their own stories of abuse and abandonment. The emotional weight of these communications sometimes overwhelmed the girls. Despite their maturity and therapeutic support, they're carrying a lot for 16-year-olds, Michael discussed with Maria during one of their evening walks around the neighborhood. Sometimes I wonder if we've asked too much of them, if we should have kept their story more private. Maria, now officially Dr. Maria Thompson Rodriguez, after completing her doctorate in family therapy, considered his concern carefully. They chose this path, Michael. Yes, we supported and guided them, but every major decision about sharing their story came from them. They found their purpose in helping other children. Taking that away now would be more damaging than the pressure they feel. The family dynamics had evolved as the girls grew older. Carlos, now 23 and working as a family therapist in Boston, remained a constant presence in their lives. His weekend visits provided the girls with a sense of normal sibling relationships, complete with teasing, inside jokes, and the comfortable arguing that characterized healthy families. Dr. Mitchell had become something beyond a therapist. She was family friend, mentor, and the professional who helped them navigate the unique challenges of their public platform. Her research on post-traumatic growth in children had been significantly influenced by Emma and Sophie's journey, leading to new therapeutic approaches that were being implemented internationally. The Safe Harbor Families organization had grown exponentially under Maria's leadership. The nonprofit now operated in 12 states, providing comprehensive services to children who had experienced familial trauma. The program's success rate was remarkable. Over 85% of children who completed their 6-month residential program successfully reunited with families or transitioned to stable long-term placements. One of the organization's most innovative programs was the Mentor Sibling Initiative, where older trauma survivors like Emma and Sophie worked with younger children who were beginning their healing journeys. The connection between children who had experienced similar traumas proved incredibly powerful for recovery. When I tell other kids that I was abandoned too, they look at me differently, Emma explained during a staff meeting at Safe Harbor. They can see that I'm okay now, that I'm happy and successful and loved. It gives them hope that they can get there too. Sophie had developed specialized cooking therapy protocols specifically for children who had experienced food insecurity or abandonment. Her gentle approach to teaching cooking skills while addressing underlying trauma had been adopted by therapeutic programs worldwide. The work was rewarding but emotionally demanding. Both girls saw therapists individually, in addition to their family sessions with Dr. Mitchell, to process the secondary trauma that came from constantly hearing other children's stories of abuse and neglect. As the girls' junior year of high school began, they faced new pressures and opportunities. Emma had been accepted into a prestigious summer art program at Yale, while Sophie had received an invitation to study under a renowned chef in Paris. For the first time since their ordeal, they were considering spending significant time apart. "I'm scared," Sophie admitted to Emma one evening as they sat in their shared study space working on college applications. "We've never been apart for more than a few days. What if something happens and you're not there?" Emma reached across the desk and took her sister's hand. "Sophie, we've spent 6 years proving that we're strong enough to handle anything. Being apart for a summer doesn't erase that strength. And besides, we'll still be connected every day." The conversation sparked a deeper discussion about their futures. Both girls had been accepted to multiple universities, but they were struggling with whether to attend the same school or pursue separate paths for the first time in their lives. Michael and Maria had worked hard to avoid pressuring the girls toward any particular decision. They understood that healthy separation was a normal part of adolescent development. But they also recognized that Emma and Sophie's bond had been forged through shared trauma and might require different considerations. "What do you two want?" Michael asked during a family dinner where college choices dominated the conversation. "Not what you think we want. Not what would be best for your foundations or organizations. What do you want for yourselves?" The question hung in the air for several moments before Emma spoke. "I want to study at Columbia," she said quietly. "Their art therapy program is exactly what I need to take my work to the next level. But I'm afraid to say that because it means leaving Sophie." Sophie nodded slowly. "And I want to go to Johnson & Wales in Rhode Island for their culinary arts program. But I feel guilty wanting something different from what Emma wants." The conversation that followed was emotional but healing. Dr. Mitchell had prepared them for this moment, explaining that healthy families support individual growth, even when it involves temporary separation. The girls talked through their fears, their hopes, and their commitment to maintaining their close relationship regardless of geographic distance. "Maybe being apart for college will make us even stronger," Sophie said finally. "We'll have our own experiences to share with each other, our own stories that aren't about trauma or recovery." As winter approached, the family faced an unexpected challenge that tested all the growth and healing they had achieved. James Morrison called with news that Victoria Crawford was eligible for parole after serving 8 years of her 15-year sentence. "She's apparently been a model prisoner," Morrison explained during an emergency family meeting. "She's completed addiction counseling, anger management, and vocational training. The parole board will consider her case in 3 months." The news hit the family like a physical blow. Victoria had been an abstract concept for so long, a criminal who had hurt them in the past, but had no ongoing presence in their lives. The possibility of her release brought back memories and fears they thought they had completely processed. Emma's immediate reaction was anger. "She doesn't get to be rehabilitated and just walk free after what she did to us. She left us outside in a storm for 3 days. She stole everything from Dad. She destroyed our family." Sophie's response was more complex. "I don't want her to contact us," she said carefully. "But I also don't want to spend energy being angry about whether she's in prison or not. She's not our mother. She never was. Her being free doesn't change who our real family is." Michael struggled with his own reactions. The protective father in him wanted Victoria to remain locked away forever. But the man who had built his life around forgiveness and healing recognized that her potential release didn't actually threaten their family's security. "We'll petition the court for a permanent restraining order," he decided. "Whatever happens with her parole, she won't be allowed to contact any of us or come within 500 miles of our home. Beyond that, we continue living our lives exactly as we have been." The family spent several sessions with Dr. Mitchell processing their feelings about Victoria's potential release. The conversations brought up old fears and traumas, but also revealed how much they had genuinely healed. 6 years ago, news like this would have devastated you all, Dr. Mitchell observed. Now you're processing it as an unfortunate development that requires practical responses, not an existential threat to your family's stability. That's remarkable growth. As the girls prepared for their final semester of high school, they decided to use Victoria's parole hearing as an opportunity to demonstrate their healing and strength. They wrote victim impact statements for the parole board, not asking for any particular outcome, but simply sharing how their lives had been affected and how they had chosen to move forward. Emma's statement was artistic and emotional. "The woman you know as Victoria Crawford took away my sense of safety, but she couldn't take away my ability to create beauty. She stole my mother, but she couldn't prevent me from finding real love with the family who chose to keep me." Sophie's statement was practical and powerful. "Victoria Crawford taught me that people can choose to hurt children, but she also taught me that other people can choose to heal children. I chose healing, and I've spent my teenage years helping other kids make the same choice." The statements were not pleas for vengeance, but testimonies to the power of resilience and the strength of chosen families. They demonstrated that Victoria's crimes had failed in their ultimate purpose. She had not destroyed the Thompson-Rodriguez family. Instead, she had inadvertently created something stronger and more beautiful than what existed before. As spring arrived and college acceptance letters poured in, the family felt a sense of anticipation rather than anxiety about the future. The girls had grown into confident young women who understood their own strength and purpose. Whatever Victoria's parole hearing brought, whatever challenges college might present, they were ready. The oak tree in their backyard had grown tall and magnificent, its branches providing shade for an entire corner of their property. Like the family that gathered beneath it, the tree had weathered storms and emerged stronger, its roots deep enough to support whatever winds might come. 10 years had passed since Victoria Crawford's parole hearing, which had ultimately been denied after the family's powerful victim impact statements and evidence of her lack of genuine remorse. Emma and Sophie Thompson Rodriguez were now 26 years old, accomplished women who had transformed their childhood trauma into a legacy that touched millions of lives worldwide. Emma stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York, addressing world leaders about the global need for art therapy programs in schools. Her presentation, Healing Through Creation, Art as a Universal Language of Recovery, was being broadcast live to education ministers and child welfare officials in over 180 countries. "When I was 8 years old," Emma began, her voice steady and confident, before the international audience, "I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect children choose to hurt them instead. But I also learned that one person's choice to love unconditionally can heal wounds that seemed impossibly deep." In the audience, Michael wiped tears from his eyes as he watched his daughter address some of the world's most powerful leaders. The scared little girl who had once huddled under an oak tree in the rain had grown into a woman whose voice could change policy and save lives on a global scale. Sophie was simultaneously making her own presentation via satellite from Paris, where she was launching the international headquarters of Nourishing Hearts. Her organization now operated in 47 countries, providing mobile kitchens and cooking therapy programs to displaced children and families affected by war, natural disasters, and poverty. "Food is the most fundamental form of care," Sophie explained to the assembled group of international aid workers and government officials. "When we teach children to cook, we teach them that they have the power to nourish themselves and others. We show them that they can create goodness even in the darkest circumstances." The simultaneous presentations were not coincidental. The sisters had planned this moment as a demonstration of how far their individual paths had taken them while maintaining their essential connection. Emma's artistic vision and Sophie's practical compassion had evolved into complementary forces for global change. Both women had graduated from their respective universities with highest honors. Emma had earned her doctorate in art therapy from Columbia and had become the youngest person ever appointed to lead the International Association of Therapeutic Arts. Sophie had graduated from culinary school and completed additional training in nutrition therapy and crisis counseling. Their personal lives had flourished alongside their professional achievements. Emma had married David Chen, a pediatric psychiatrist she met while volunteering at a children's hospital in Manhattan. Their wedding, held under the oak tree in Greenwich, had been a celebration of chosen family, with Maria officially walking Emma down the aisle and Dr. Mitchell performing the ceremony. Sophie had found love with Isabella Rodriguez, a social worker who shared her passion for helping displaced families. Their commitment ceremony, held in the gardens of Safe Harbor Family's headquarters, had been attended by hundreds of children and families whose lives had been touched by Sophie's work. Michael, now 58, had stepped back from active management of Thompson Pharmaceuticals to focus on the Thompson Rodriguez Foundation, which had become one of the largest private funders of childhood trauma research and treatment programs worldwide. His hair had gone completely silver, but his energy and dedication to protecting children had only intensified with age. Dr. Maria Thompson Rodriguez had been appointed to the President's Commission on Child Welfare, where she advised national policy on family preservation and trauma-informed care. Her research on post-traumatic growth in children had been translated into dozens of languages and was used in training programs for social workers and therapists globally. Carlos, now 33, had become the director of a residential treatment facility for adolescents with severe trauma histories. His gentle strength and understanding of sibling bonds made him uniquely effective at helping families heal together rather than apart. Dr. Mitchell, approaching retirement, had written the definitive textbook on family-centered trauma therapy, with the Thompson-Rodriguez family's journey serving as the central case study. Her work had revolutionized how mental health professionals approached childhood trauma, shifting from individual treatment to whole family healing models. On this particular day in October, as Emma addressed the UN and Sophie launched her international expansion, the family was also celebrating another milestone, the 20th anniversary of the night that changed everything. Rather than marking it as a day of trauma, they had transformed it into an annual celebration of resilience and renewal. The evening celebration took place, as always, under the oak tree that had witnessed their lowest moment and countless triumphs since. The gathering had grown over the years to include dozens of families from around the world who had been helped by the various organizations and programs the Thompson-Rodriguez family had created. Children who had once been homeless were now successful. Adults with families of their own, teenagers who had aged out of foster care, had found stability and purpose through the mentorship programs. Artists who had discovered their voices through Emma's programs now ran their own therapeutic studios. Chefs who had learned to cook in Sophie's mobile kitchens now fed their own communities with love and skill. 20 years ago tonight, Michael addressed the assembled crowd as the sun set behind the massive oak tree. My daughters learned that sometimes the world can be cruel and unfair, but they also began learning that love is stronger than cruelty, that healing is possible after the deepest wounds, and that broken things can be made more beautiful than they ever were before. Emma stepped forward, now carrying her 6-month-old daughter, Grace Maria Chen. This little one will grow up knowing that families are built on choice, not just biology. She'll know that trauma doesn't define us. How we respond to trauma defines us. Sophie, holding hands with Isabella, nodded in agreement. She'll also know that the best way to heal from hurt is to help other people heal from theirs. Every child we've been able to help has helped us too. The crowd included a special group that evening, 7 young adults who had been part of Victoria Crawford's other schemes, children who had been abandoned or traumatized by her criminal activities across different states and years. Through the detective work and advocacy of safe harbor families, these survivors had been identified, supported, and helped to heal. We call ourselves the Phoenix family, explained Marcus Williams, her 24-year-old who had been 4 when Victoria destroyed his father's life in Ohio. We rose from the ashes of what that woman did to us, and we found each other through Emma and Sophie's work. The Phoenix family had become a support network for all of Victoria's victims, providing peer counseling, advocacy, and proof that no matter how calculated the cruelty, survivors could find each other and thrive together. As the evening continued, Dr. Mitchell stood to share some news that brought the story full circle. I received a call this week from the Connecticut Department of Corrections, she announced. Victoria Crawford has been denied parole for the 3rd time, but more importantly, she'll be eligible for supervised release programs only if she completes a new therapeutic program designed to help narcissistic criminals develop genuine empathy and remorse. The news was met with thoughtful silence rather than celebration. The family had long since moved beyond needing Victoria to suffer for their own healing, but they recognized that her continued incarceration meant other families were protected from her predatory behavior. I hope she does learn empathy, Emma said quietly. Not for our sake, but for hers. Living without the ability to genuinely love other people must be the loneliest existence imaginable. Sophie nodded in agreement. The worst thing she did wasn't stealing money, or even abandoning us outside. The worst thing was that she never let herself experience real love. We've had 20 years of real love. She's had 20 years of nothing. As the celebration continued into the evening, with music and storytelling, and the sharing of meals prepared collectively, Michael reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The scared, betrayed father who had found his daughters in the rain had evolved into a man whose family now spanned continents and included thousands of children who had found healing through their programs. The most remarkable transformation, however, was in Emma and Sophie themselves. The traumatized 8-year-olds who had survived on rainwater and berries had become women whose courage and compassion inspired global movements for child welfare and trauma recovery. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Victoria had never come into our lives? Emma asked her father during a quiet moment as the celebration wound down. Michael considered the question carefully. I used to, he admitted. I used to imagine what our family would have looked like if I'd married someone who was genuinely loving, if you'd grown up without trauma, if our lives had been conventionally happy. And now? Sophie asked, joining the conversation. Now I realize that conventional happiness might have made us comfortable, but it wouldn't have made us powerful. Your trauma became your superpower, the ability to help other children heal. My betrayal became my purpose, protecting families from predators like Victoria. Our worst experience became our greatest gift to the world. As the last guest departed, and the family cleaned up under the stars, they maintained their tradition of sharing gratitudes from the past year. The practice had evolved as the girls grew up, becoming more sophisticated and reflective while maintaining its essential warmth. I'm grateful for roots that go deep enough to support any storm, Emma said, looking up at the oak tree that had grown magnificent and strong over the decades. I'm grateful for wings that can carry our love to children all over the world, Sophie added, thinking of the international expansion of her programs. I'm grateful for second chances and chosen families, and the knowledge that love really is stronger than fear, Maria contributed. I'm grateful for the privilege of watching broken children become healers themselves, Carlos said via video call from Boston, where he was unable to travel due to a crisis at his facility. I'm grateful for proof that the human spirit cannot be broken by cruelty, only strengthened by love, Dr. Mitchell added. Michael looked around at his family, biological, adopted, chosen and extended, and felt overwhelmed by the abundance that had grown from their deepest loss. I'm grateful for the lesson that sometimes what feels like an ending is actually a beginning. 20 years ago, I thought Victoria had destroyed our family. Instead, she had set us free to build something more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. As they prepared to go inside, Sophie made an announcement that surprised everyone. Isabella and I have been approved to adopt siblings, 3 children whose parents were killed in a car accident. They're arriving next month. The news was met with excitement and offers of support from the entire family. Emma immediately began planning art therapy sessions for the new additions, while Michael and Maria discussed expanding the Safe Harbor program to include their specific needs. Their names are Lily, Marcus and baby James, Sophie continued. They're 6, 4 and 18 months old. They've been in foster care for 8 months, and they need a family that understands trauma and healing. The circle was completing itself once again. Children who had experienced loss and trauma would be welcomed into a family that had transformed their own trauma into tools for healing. The oak tree would witness new little ones learning to trust, to love, and eventually to help other children in their turn. As the family finally headed inside, Michael paused for one last look at the tree where everything had changed 20 years ago. The massive trunk and sprawling branches created a canopy of protection and beauty, a living symbol of growth from adversity. In the distance, he could see the lights of Safe Harbor Family's headquarters, where night shift counselors were providing support to families in crisis. Across the country and around the world, children were falling asleep in art therapy centers and mobile kitchens and family treatment facilities that existed because 2 little girls had survived a terrible night and chosen to transform their pain into purpose. The storm that had brought Emma and Sophie to that oak tree had indeed passed, and from it had grown not just one rainbow, but thousands, arcing across the globe, touching every continent, lighting the way for countless children to find their way home to love and safety and hope. The Thompson-Rodriguez family had proven that some stories have endings more beautiful than their beginnings, that some wounds heal stronger than unbroken skin, and that sometimes the cruelest betrayals become the foundation for the most extraordinary love. As Michael turned off the last light